The Breezy Point City Council for Monday, December 5th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 3, consent agenda. One action, topics will not be discussed unless removed from consent agenda. Items requiring the expenditures of funds are budgeted items or have been previously discussed and approved by the City Council. 3A, October 3rd, 2022, regular City Council meeting minutes. 3B, approval of claims totaling $103,142.29, comprised of electronic checks 3134E to 3135E and physical checks 138028 to 138095. 3C, approval of personnel policy amendments. 3D, approval of Assistant City Administrator FLSA status change. 3F, 3E, approval of audit engagement letter with Clifton Larson Allen for audit services. 3F, approval of MOU with LELS Local 359. 3G, Resolution 21-2022, accepting donations to the Pelican Woods Cemetery. And 3H, Resolution 22-2022, setting official polling place. After read items, is there anything from the council that they wish to pull at this time?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to pull item A for the City Council meeting minutes for a quick fix.
Okay, so we'll move the meeting minutes down into the agenda, and we'll deal with them at that time then.
One additional item is, while it's mentioned in the option of C for personnel policy amendments, it did not make the packet about the organizational chart.
Okay.
Should that be pulled, or do we all have a copy in front of us?
We all have a copy,
Okay.
and I think we're all comfortable with that, so we should be fine, so. All right, anything else from council? Okay, hearing none, we've pulled 3A to be moved further down into the agenda. With 3A being pulled, do I have a motion to approve the remaining consent agenda items?
So moved.
I have a council member Lillehei with motion.
I'll second.
Council member Ball with the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Moving on to item 4 on the agenda is open forum. Is there anybody here in the audience at this time that wishes to address the City Council in open forum? I'll ask again, is there anybody at this time who wishes to address the City Council in open forum? Hearing none, open forum is closed. Moving on to item 5 in the agenda, Mayor and City Council reports and committee reports. 5A, Mayor, Joint Powers Board. Joint Powers Board met November 14th, 2022. The main item of business that was covered during that time was, of course, accepting the resignation letter of Chief Nelson. He has decided to step down as chief and also retire from the fire department, fire district. So we accepted that resignation with regret. And then also we worked on selection of officers. So as a part of the new Joint Powers Board, there's now where the Joint Powers Board has input into the selection of the officers. So that was done. Applications were taken. There was one application for chief, and that was Mike Schwankel. There were 2 applications received for assistant chief. That was Darren Nordby and Trevor Lang. All 3 of them were approved by the Joint Powers Board. So as of December, now coming up, Mike Schwankel will be the new chief of the fire district, and his assistants will be Darren Nordby and Trevor Lang. And then other than that, we had a financial update, and that was pretty much the main operation that we had. We did talk about our fiscal agent. So I've addressed this with the council before. In the past, we're looking at getting an independent fiscal agent. The RFPs that was put out came back, no, we did not get anybody that put in an RFP for us. So we've now since reached out to MCIT the City Trust, and then a few others as well, looking for feedback as to who might be a potential candidate that we could submit an RFP to. What we found is that just individual companies weren't interested in wanting to take that on. So the Minnesota City Trust, we looked into them, and then we were checking with we also asked the city administrators from the two cities to talk with other fire districts in the state. Of course, we're not alone. There are other fire districts in this state, especially down in the Twin Cities area. So we asked them to check with them to see who they were carrying as a fiscal agent and potentially gain some leads from that. So we continue to work on that. Other than that, the fire district is, I think, doing well. They have their new officers now, so that'll be a change, and the firefighters will be getting up to speed with their new officers and working on that. So, Councilmember Ball, anything to add to that?
Oh, that's good update. Thank you.
Good. All right. With that, I'm going to move on to 5B, City Council members. 5B-I is Finance Committee. Basically, spoke with Councilmember Ball. We're going to save our comments until we get down to the budget presentation. And at that time, if there are any questions specific to that, the council can ask, and we can also provide information. So we'll move on to B2, Personnel Committee.
Personnel Committee met. We discussed the items that were actually just approved in the consent agenda as far as the personal policy updates, which mirrored what the LELS contract did, and then the Assistant City Administrator FLSA status, which we just approved.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. And then B3, Road Committee.
Road Committee also met on November 28th. We discussed the Bushman Road RFP responses, which will be later in the agenda here. We also discussed a review of the draft speed study, which again is also on the agenda later on for us to talk about, along with the sewer study proposal. One of the things, though, that you'll see just right behind this is the pavement analysis report that we received from WSB. Again, this was free of service from WSB. So they reviewed that and gave it to staff, and we're going to incorporate that with our capital improvement plan for our roads.
All right. Sounds good. Excellent. Thank you for the report. All right, moving on to item 6 in the agenda. 6A is a public hearing and consideration for proposed ordinance 2022-06. Administrator Chansky, would you like to give us a little brief update here?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So during the Committee of the Whole meeting on November 15th, the county board had invited cities and townships from throughout Crow Wing County to come discuss the county's short-term rental ordinance. Obviously, this is something the county originally had started to consider amending back in September. They had some amendments they proposed. They took public comment. Public comment came, and what the public comment, while varied, most of it came in to an extent of we aren't necessarily happy in one way, shape, or form with the county's ordinance. The discussion the county board had at that point was in a little bit of a, they weren't quite sure what to do. Because some cities said we like the county doing it, some cities says we don't want the county doing it, some cities said we want the county to do it for us, but we want changes. So they held this meeting to hear from entities to figure out really what it came down to. The question is, should the county continue to license short-term rentals under its public health authority, which it currently does, which then imposes that authority across the entire county, or should they replace their ordinance under its land use authority? And in that situation, the county would only issue or regulate short-term rentals within its land use jurisdiction, which would be unorganized territories and townships, except for 2 that do land use themselves. After hearing from the entities, the county board had a unanimous consensus to move forward with repealing their public health ordinance and to replace it with a land use ordinance. In the packet, you have a letter from Crow Wing County Administrator Tim Houle that kind of describes what the county's process is at this point. So they're now in that process of repealing that ordinance and replacing it with the land use ordinance. What does that mean for the city of Breezy Point? It means that once that ordinance is changed, Crow Wing County will no longer issue short-term rental licenses in the city of Breezy Point as they do not have land use authority here. That does have an effect, though minor, on our current ordinance that you just adopted on short-term rental licensing that goes into effect in January. that effect is that under 115.003, general provisions and requirements, A was that we were requiring licensees, people who are applying for a Breezy Point license, to first get a Crow Wing County license. Well, if Crow Wing County is no longer going to be licensing properties in Breezy Point, they can't even get a license, so it's really a moot point. Because if they go to Crow Wing County is going to say, I can't, not only will I not issue a license, I can't issue a license. So that item needs to be struck from the ordinance. So that is what ordinance 22-06 proposes to do. It's just to strike A from 115-003 and then re-letter all the remaining sections of that section. And so with that, like any other ordinance amendment, Mr. Mayor, the process should follow with a public hearing to any comment on this ordinance change. And again, this is a public comment on should this line be struck from this ordinance. And then following that, the council can deliberate and take any action you deem appropriate.
Thank you, Administrator Chansky. So what we have now is we are going to open up for a public hearing for people to comment on this one item within the ordinance. It's the only thing that's being amended at this point in the ordinance, and that is to strike out A, which would require people who are getting a short-term rental license in the city of Breezy Point to also receive one from Crow Wing County. So that is what we're going to be taking comments on, nothing else of the ordinance at this time. So with that, I am going to open up the public hearing for proposed ordinance 2022-06. I would ask that if you're going to come and address the council, you limit your comments to 3 minutes. When you come forward, please state your name and your address as you address the council. And if you are somebody who is in the audience getting ready to address the council and your comments have pretty much already been stated by another, to keep from getting redundant, we ask that unless you have specific other things that you would like to add, that you would not add those into your comments as well. So again, it's for time, but it's also for just so we don't have a lot of redundancy with some of the same comments over and over again. So with that being said, I will open it up at this point. So the public hearing is now open for proposed ordinance 2022-06. Is there anybody that would address the council? State your name and your address, please.
Colleen Coates, 30760
Please speak into the mic, please.
North Lakeview Drive. I find it very confusing, and I feel like this whole ordinance from start to where we're at now has been pieced apart. This piece here, and now we're doing it again. I think I thought we were led to believe that Part B of this Part A, and I know you're saying you only want to talk about the one sentence, but this ordinance has 2 parts to it. And I thought that we needed to use Part B because of what was happening in Part A. Part A was the county randomly giving out license to anybody irregardless of their address. Well, then all of a sudden, because of that, we had to have Part B and open up the whole city-wide to take away the zoning, basically. And I think the one stronghold that residents have is in zoning. And I think you're going down a really dangerous route when you start throwing that out the window and saying, but anyway, getting back to it, I think that it's very confusing. And I think to try to address one part of this ordinance when there's a second part, it's almost like this ordinance is warring with itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the council at this time? Okay, hearing none. Public hearing for proposed ordinance 2022-06 is now closed. So the next step in the process is council. You've seen the information provided before you. The ordinance we currently are just approved has a piece of information into it now that is no longer, it doesn't fit. If we leave it in there, our ordinance is in conflict. So in order to get our ordinance in conjunction with what's going on, we need to look at striking this out and moving forward at this point. I think there are also some other things that the county provided in their ordinance that is now no longer there that potentially needs to be looked at. But at this point in time, we're looking at one thing. So I can only address what we have in front of us, not the larger scope of that. So with that, is there any discussion, or do I have
I'll have discussion.
okay?
Like was just brought up, the second portion to our last ordinance amendment was the location. And it was brought up time and time again that because the county was gonna go citywide, we allowed it citywide. I still have a problem with having it throughout the entire city. I think we needed to keep it within those districts that were only allowed the short-term rental. So this allows us to go back to that and not have an issue because the county is not the one who is issuing the license right off the bat. So if we left the ordinance as it is today, nobody would be able to get a short-term rental because the county is not going to give them one, therefore a city one can't be. So we have a little out clause.
Yeah.
But the other issues that we also have is that the county was also the one who's going to be supplying the website with the details of who the management company is. Now that puts a large onus on the city to have that information up to date and consistent up to date. And what time frame is that information going to be up to date? So right now I think we're still in a slippery slope. I understand where we went with it last time and I was still against it. I'm still against it going citywide right now.
No. I mean, I can't disagree with you based on what the county's now done. I don't know if we're able to address that right now in front of us, and that may have to be another meeting in the future with the council moving forward to readdress that piece of it. So, I mean, from my perspective, that's where I see that, and I think you might want to take a look at that again, but ultimately right now, I mean, you could leave the ordinance as is right now, and then it just sits there. So then you still are gonna have to do something with this as well as the other piece if the council so chooses to address that again. So that would be my comment back. Councilmember Bakken, I can see you'd like to make a comment.
I totally agree with Michael.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I also agree with the young lady who came to testify. It's a mess. It's a slippery slope. And as I see it currently, it's no good for this city. It's got to be controlled, and the 23 administration will face this. I'd like to send it back to planning and zoning for a full rewrite, more teeth in it, and I won't go any further than that.
Any other comments from other council?
I guess I'll just
Go ahead.
quickly, I am still happy with what we passed previously. I understand that maybe we wouldn't have went through that process if the Crow Wing County wouldn't have done what they did. However, what we had was not working. We couldn't enforce it. And now we have something that is more enforceable and better, I think. So, yes, and maybe it needs to be reviewed for potential changes, but we knew that was going to happen with what we passed anyways, so.
We did? I don't disagree with that either.
Right, planning and zoning really has nothing to do with this from the standpoint of writing it because the ordinance belongs to city council. We just sent it back to them to do the grunt work, but it belongs to us, the text belongs to us, so we are the ones responsible for it, not planning and zoning. And to echo what Rebecca was saying, we had an ordinance on the books that wasn't working, and I think we made great strides to make this ordinance have more teeth and to be workable. As far as the website goes, we did have a proposal, I want to say a couple years ago, from the same company that is doing the website for Crow Wing County, and they had a proposal that would do everything that we would ask, keeping track of the violations, locations, and everything. We may have to look into that in the future. It wasn't terribly expensive. It was something that it had, some cost to it. We'll have to consider that. but it was very flexible, very good website, had a lot of information on it, and it would provide us with a lot of feedback and be very user-friendly to the people. So, and from that standpoint, what we have here, striking this one, we have to do that. I mean, that's just a given. And I think come 2023, for the new people, it's going to be a challenge. But the zoning areas that we had designated before, none of the short-term rentals were in those zones. I mean, so it is essentially not workable from the standpoint of that's not where the actual people that are doing it are actually renting the places, so.
Yeah, and I hear all the comments and I agree with just about everything too. I believe that moving forward, it's gonna be the 2023 administration who's gonna have to look at this again. It doesn't surprise me. I think even when we passed the ordinance, even at the last time, we all kind of said to each other, we figured it was gonna come back around again and didn't think it was gonna happen this fast, but it has. So, that's an unfortunate thing. I think also to the point about the website and potentially information, maybe there's an opportunity, and I don't want to speak for the administrator and our assistant administrator of the project we've got going on right now with our complete upgrade to our website, but maybe there's some potential for that type of thing to be built in and added to that as we work forward in that process. So that might be something that they'll be able to look at and say, maybe there's an opportunity that that type of thing can be added in there, which to me would make great sense with the idea that we're going to update that completely anyway. So I think that to that point, I do agree that we ultimately probably have to take action on this one piece item within this ordinance, just so that other things can continue to move forward, with the idea that ultimately the 2023 administration is probably going to be looking at it again based on what they determine and decide. I have no doubt probably maybe when they have their goal setting session, that might be one of them in there, so you never know. But so with that's where I see it too. So I think we do have to take action on this so that it can be in place and it's at least functioning for the time being, rather than being derelict and not functioning at all. We've dealt with that for quite a bit of time with our previous ordinance before we approved the new one. So
I do have one question. If this ordinance amendment fails tonight, does that mean that no short-term rental could be approved as of January 1 because it is not meeting criteria A that a Crow Wing County license has to be obtained?
So
good question.
As the ordinance is written, technically that's correct. So the letter of the law says no. The spirit of the law is determined by the city council would be whether at that point are we to ignore that clause or not.
So I guess technically it would be, because as it's written, to not strike it would be yes. So the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Yep. So, any other further comments? Without hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the proposed ordinance 2022-06 as amended?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Ball. I have a second from Councilmember Lillehei. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Motion passes. All right, 6B. Public comment on implementation of body-worn cameras. Administrator Chansky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So back in, I believe it was October, we issued notice that the city was taking comment on, at least the police department was taking comment on looking at implementing body-worn cameras to be looking at part of the 2023 budget. They are included in the proposed 2023 budget that we will be presenting to you tonight. However, per state statute, and we got listed there, 626.8473, it says the governing body with jurisdiction over the budget of the law enforcement agency must provide an opportunity for public comment at a regularly scheduled meeting. And that's to be done prior to the purchase and implementation of body-worn cameras. So we have tonight, we thought it'd be appropriate before you adopt the budget, when this is an included item, to take that comment. There really is, beyond taking comment, no action you need to take right now, as your action would be included as part of the budget process.
Correct. Thank you, Administrator Chansky. All right, so with that, I will open it up to public comment on implementation of body-worn cameras. You heard the update or the overview by Administrator Chansky as to why this is going on and what's happening, but we do need to have it per state statute. So is there anybody at this time that would like to come forward and make a public comment regarding our police officers using body-worn cameras? I'll ask again, is there anybody who wishes to come forward to provide public comment on implementation of body-worn cameras by our police department? Hearing none, public comment period is now closed. Moving on, 6C, consideration of speed study policy. Administrator Chansky.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Councilmember Maroney mentioned this as part of the road committee report. So during the Shoreview Lane speed study process, the road committee determined that they did want to enact a formal policy that would govern future speed studies, how they would be requested, and then looking at how it would be determined how they would be conducted. So staff, we went in to draft that policy, presented it back to the road committee, then made just a few slight changes to it. The amended from their changes policy is in your packet. But essentially there are 5 main criteria for requesting a study as part of this policy. A street must be under the jurisdiction of the city. State and county highways and roadways are not eligible for implementation of a traffic calming or controlling measures, as we do not have jurisdiction over those roads. Also, the street must not be classified as an easement designated for use or maintenance. Again, it's not an actual street, it's an easement, so it needs to be a platted right-of-way. The street must be designated for use and maintenance. It must be 100% built out to be considered for review. So in that project area, that road needs to be done. It can't be partially built out. The affected street must have residential or commercial land use with active residency directly fronting or adjacent to a roadway. So it can't just be, if you're requesting, as we get into the requirements for requesting the policy, you actually have to be on the road and have residency on the road to request the policy. And to commence a study, the request must be made by a tax-paying property owner along the corridor in question and conclude a petition signed by surrounding property owners. I do want to add, so the policy includes an application and petition form, so we thought it would be important to have an actual form, a unified form that anyone requesting a policy can fill out. And then on the back side, again, we're providing them with the petition side to get signatures. For a request to be brought before the road committee, that's where it would start, who would then make a recommendation to the full city council. The petitioner must complete the form in its entirety, and per the policy, have signatures of at least 25 property owners within 1,000 feet of the primary study area. So you take 1,000 feet in another direction, and then you go, how many properties are on that area? And 25% of those property owners have to sign the study for it to be considered. And finally, the implementation of a study is at the discretion of the city council. So this application is to request one. It by no means binds the city council to actually doing a study. With that, I guess I'll take any questions, or I guess Councilmember Maroney or Councilmember Lillehei can also weigh in with their thoughts on the speed study.
Thank you, Administrator Chansky. Councilmember Maroney, Councilmember Lillehei, you both serve on the road committee. Any further comments you'd like to make at this time based on that?
I have nothing further to add.
I think it's pretty straightforward. We didn't have a policy before, now we're implementing, we've drafted a policy, and we can move forward.
Yeah, I personally didn't see anything in there that I had questions about. Again, I thought it was good. I'm glad we have one because we didn't before.
Right.
And I think it's important to have something going forward, so there's a standard in place. I think that's always important, and everybody understands what that is. And
That
I'm
was the
sure-
reason.
Go ahead.
That was the reason.
Yeah.
Because
No,
we didn't have a
absolutely.
policy.
Councilmember Ball, Councilmember Bakken, any comments?
Just one simple one, perhaps. Maybe the administrator can answer it for me, or the county engineer. What's built out? Define built out for me.
It
As
mean-
pertaining to every road in this city.
For example, a minimum maintenance road would not be considered built out.
Say that again?
A minimum maintenance road would be, for example, would not be considered as built
So all
out.
our existing roads, the B, Bird Streets, et cetera,
Would be,
are built out. That's what I need to know. Thank you.
I think the definition of built out would be completed to completion of paved, bituminous surface, if it's curbed or not, those types of things. But as Administrator Chansky said, like a minimum maintenance road, which we have a bunch of those too, those would not be considered that, so, okay. Anything else? All right. Hearing nothing, any further comments, do I have a motion to approve the speed study policy as presented?
Also move.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilmember Maroney, I have a second from Councilmember Bakken. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 6D, consideration and adoption of the 2023 fee schedule. Administrator Chansky.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a item, while related to the budget, is separate from the budget. Every year, the council adopts its fee schedule for the following year. So that's what the attached resolution does. We, again, reviewed this as part of the Finance Committee reviewed this. There are a couple changes that I would like to call out that we are looking at making for 2023. The first is increased dog licenses from $10 to $20. Currently, our dog license is a lifetime license, and $20 just does better cover our costs for issuing those licenses. Increased golf cart permits from $15 to $20. This was something that was also I presented when I presented the preliminary levy. That's something we were looking at doing. And the reason for this increase from $15 to $20 is on average we issue about 650 golf permits per year for the last few years, and it can steadily increase, continue to increase. And we do have a lot of costs associated with those. First, we have the cost of the actual stickers. We have to order those, special order those every single year, so there's the cost of the stickers. And then there's quite a bit of staff time that's involved in issuing those permits. When people come in and go to the counter, go issue the process, going to aviation days and doing other events to try to get people to get their fees, as well as the cost of the accounting. Carrie does a lot of work of, it's not just people coming in, writing their check, and then we give them a sticker. Carrie has to do all the accounting for that to make sure that it's accounted for and in our those funds are accounted for properly. And so right now at $15, we really don't break even with the cost that it is to issue those. I think $20 gets us closer to that break-even point. And so we are recommending that golf cart permits in 2023 be increased to $20. We do have an increase in culverts from $170 to $225. Again, that's just a cost. We've had an increase in the cost of culverts. So that, again, is just to break us even on the cost of culverts. And then the other one is increasing quarterly sewer charges from $70 to $75. We discussed this with the road committee, talking about the sewer expansion study, talked about it a little bit in when I presented the preliminary levy. Joe discussed the condition of our current sewer plant in October when he did an update on our sewer plant. And in the 2023 budget, we do have an inclusion of a sewer expansion study. And what we know is that in less than 10 years, we are less than 10 years from reaching capacity and will need to expand in some way, shape, or form. That's the purpose of that study. But we know that we're going to have to do that. We know it's going to be expensive, likely in the millions of dollars, depending on how the city chooses to expand that system. And so we know that increases are going to come as those quarterly increases are that enterprise fund. The sewer is an enterprise fund to cover those costs. The more fees we get, the less we have to potentially bond for later down the road, and we can pay cash for it. The city has not raised sewer fees in over 6 years. So what we're recommending is a $5 increase starting in 2023. This is $5 per quarter. So not $5 a month, it is $5 a quarter. We bill quarterly. And start that in 2023. In 2023, we'll do our sewer expansion study. Once that is done, we're going to hand that study over to a financial consultant who will then actually do a true rate study, who then will give us a recommendation of increases. We know we're going to have increases in coming years. We just felt by doing some increase, a small increase now, hopefully means smaller increases in future years instead of having big increases down the road. Community rental fees, again, that we just updated that to reflect the direction that the council made in August. Equipment rental fees, we just removed that. We're not really sure why. Honestly, wasn't really sure why that was in there. It's not a generally good practice to be renting out our equipment. There's liabilities with that, so we just removed that from the fee schedule. And then each year, each columbarium tier in the cemetery receives an annual $10 increase. So each tier within the columbarium was raised $10 as well. So those are the recommended changes. Otherwise, everything else in the fee schedule is current in 2022.
Thank you, Administrator Chansky. Do you have any comments you want to make, Councilmember Wall, since you're on the Finance Committee?
No, I just appreciate the work that you've done, David, on this, and I think the changes are good, so.
Any other comments from council? Yeah, I would just echo the work that went into it. I think David did a good job of reviewing everything and going through when he brought it to, of course, we reviewed it as the Finance Committee and looked over the things, and I think they all make sense. I think they're all pertinent to what happens when a city grows and gets bigger, and that's what's definitely happening here in Breezy Point. So that's really the only other comments I have either. So with that, if not hearing any other comments, do I have a motion to approve Resolution 23-2022 for the 2023 fee schedule?
So moved.
Councilmember Bakken has a motion.
Second?
Second from Councilmember Lillehei. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion is carried. Moving on, item 6E, public hearing and adoption of the 2023 budget and levy. I will turn it over to Administrator Chansky to give a presentation, and then we will move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, we are here. Kind of the big item for tonight is to discuss the 2023 budget and levy. What are the purpose of the discussion? First, I'm just going to walk through the city's 2020, their proposed budget and levy. And then, per state statute, the council will allow for a public input on that budget and levy. And then after that, the city council will discuss and consider adopting the 2023 City of Breezy Point budget and levy. I do want to state before we go further that, especially when we get to the public hearing, this is not the time to discuss property valuation. That's done in the spring of each year, is when the county does you get your evaluation notice. Then we hold Board of Appeals, and we have discussion of your actual valuations. If you have questions about your property valuation classification, I encourage you to call the Crow Wing County Land Services Department at 218-824-1010. So what is the levy? Very quickly, it's the amount of money that the city needs to collect through property taxes to ensure a balanced budget. In the simplest form, how we calculate it is we take our expenditures, we subtract from that all anticipated non-tax revenues, such as permit fees, golf cart fees, etc. And that's what's left to cover our expenditures is the tax levy. The city has 4 total levies that make up its total levies. Those are the general fund, the EDA fund, the cemetery fund, and the debt fund. We do have a few other miscellaneous funds we'll talk about later, but they are non-levying funds. So first I want to go really quickly over how taxes are determined. So the first thing happens is the county determines an estimated market value for the city. That's done by the county assessor's office in Crow Wing County. They take that estimated market value, they insert it to what they call a statutory formula that is based on how the property is classified, be the commercial, residential, homestead, rental, agriculture, etc., Don't ask me what that statutory formula is. It's kind of this magic ball that numbers go in and numbers come out. And that results in the tax capacity of the city. The other element is the city's tax levy. Again, this is the city's income or revenue that we don't get from fees and other uses of service. You subtract that tax levy by the city's tax capacity, and you get a tax rate. So in short, there's two elements when we determine taxes. You have your estimated market value. That's what the county assessor has determined your property is worth. And you have your city's tax levy. A good image I like to use, I've heard best used, is the city's tax levy is a pie. That is determined, the size of that pie is determined by the city council. The estimated market value is an individual's slice of that pie. How much of that pie are you responsible for? That is determined by the assessor. So we kind of touched those. When the council sets the levy today, we set levies in dollars. So it'll be a specific dollar amount. That's the dollar amount that we're going to collect through taxes. Again, property values determine how much of the levy you are responsible for as an individual property owner. So, again, how individual properties taxes are determined, very simplified. Take your tax capacity, multiply the tax rate, equals an individual property taxes. So if you get a little more detailed, the city of Breezy Point from the county assessor has an estimated market value, or we say EMV, of $776,089,900. That equates to a tax capacity of $8,001,193. The proposed 2023 levy is $2,952,739. If we subtract that by the tax capacity, we get a proposed tax rate for 2023 of 36.9%. Comparing that to previous years, the 2021 market value for the city was a little over $552 million. So our market value has increased by over $223 million in 2022. Our tax capacity in 2021 was a little over 5.7 million, which means we have increased a little over 2.23 million in 2022. And last year's levy was $2,747,401. So our proposed levy is an increase of a little over $205,000 for 2023. Our tax rate, I didn't get that in here, but our tax rate for I have that, where did I put that? Tax rate for 2022 was 47.605%. So when we look at our proposed tax rate, we're down over 10%, almost 11%. Again, how we got down, the tax rates dropped down, is because our tax capacity has increased by such an amount. I'll use an individual property taxes, an example. If a regular single-family home had a value of $350,000, a taxable market value of $350,000, that generally equates to a tax capacity of $3,500. Multiply that by the city's tax rate, this property should equate to taxes of $1,291.58. So that is how an individual's property taxes are determined. Again, we take the tax capacity, which is determined by the market value, determined by the city assessor, times the tax rate, which is determined using the city's levy, equals an individual's property taxes in a very simple form. There are other things that take into account when determining tax capacity, such as if you have a homestead exemption, if you have a veterans exemption, if you have an ag exemption, all these other exemptions determine your tax capacity, but that is multiplied by the city's tax rate. So that is a breakdown of how we get our budget, or how the taxes are determined. Now looking at the budget itself, very quickly, this is a breakdown of services from the general fund, which is our operating fund. Like most cities, the majority of our budget is public safety, or not the majority, the plurality, the largest section of our budget is public safety. Then you look at public works at 20%, administration at 10%, parks at 5%, land use at 5%, parks at 1%, and then the other 27%, that is things such as fire, insurance, and other such services. So in determining creating the 2023 budget, we had a couple considerations. The first being a full year of the assistant city administrator position that was created in 2022 but wasn't budgeted for the full year. Implementation of a cost of living increase and our markets and the implementation of our market study that was done late this summer. Annual employee step increases, a new contract with LALS Local number 359 that goes into effect on January 1st, and then annual insurance increases that we have every year. So looking at some changes in our budget, again, the full budget is in the packet. Some of the highlighted changes, tax forfeit land sales, we increased those a little bit just to based off of actuals we experience every year. Golf cart permits, again, we had an increase that you just adopted that we had proposed from $15 to $20. Short-term rental licenses, that'll be new form of revenue in 2023. Building permits, we've upped our estimated revenue from building permits just to be consistent with what we've had the last few years and what we see coming in 2023 as well. And in the expenditures, for administration, city council, and city attorney, obviously we have some increases in all three of those categories based off of compensation. Again, full year of the assistant city administrator, market study, COLA. Training, we have an increase of there due to anticipated increase in training. We're still coming kind of back from COVID, getting people the training that they should have. We have some new positions, new assistant city administrator position, as well as some training for new council members. Professional services under city council, you'll see an increase in there. That $20,000 that was an increase there, that's the line item for the City Hall assessment study to again look at City Hall, what kind of improvements City Hall will need in the future, and then just future planning for City Hall. And then we had an increase for the city attorney, and that's really to cover ongoing litigation, primarily with Osawatomie. PD, again, we have some increases in compensation, training, and education that are just associated with a new contract with LALS, as well as for the non-union employees, COLA and market study impacts, as well as we also have budget. We've just been discussing for last year the addition of a 7th police officer. That is included in this budget as a January 1 hire. IT support, I mentioned this back in September, but really quickly, I'll mention it here and skip it everywhere else. We looked at IT, Carrie and I did, and Carrie was great and reorganized IT support services to look at each department and what is really each department's burden of all those IT support services and reallocate those accordingly, although we are not planning an increase overall. Fuel, again, we're still seeing higher fuel levels, costs even from a year ago. They came down a little bit, but have kind of stagnated, so we have an increase for fuel costs. Building maintenance, talked about this in September as well. The PD is in a lot better shape than City Hall is, but again, it is a building that's approaching its 20-year anniversary, and it is going to start needing some improvements for the next few years, so we're just increasing that building maintenance budget a little bit for the next few years so we can slowly chip away at that and then not end up in a situation that we are with City Hall that needs a lot of maintenance in a small period of time. Some capital that we're looking to purchase with levy dollars, so in the general fund, is the annual squad replacement. We replace one squad every year. And then body cameras and squad cameras that we are also looking to implement in 2023. Public Works, again, implementation of COLA and market study. Fuels, even especially when you look at diesel, we've seen over the last few months unleaded come down a little bit, but diesel continues to stay high. Road materials, repairs and maintenance, we've left roughly the same. IT support, we've already covered that. Capital, again, we're looking at levy dollars here. So some of the things that we're looking at is the replacement of the F-350. That was something that was in the CIP plan for this year. And then $75,000 towards an additional dump truck. I'm going to cover the dump truck a little later in this, but we're looking at $75,000 from the Public Works general fund budget, so those levy dollars towards that dump truck. And then also in the annual transfer to the 401 fund for future capital expenses like we do every year. Planning and zoning building, compensation there went up very slightly, even though we have a full year of the assistant city administrator position, which is partially budgeted out of or charged to planning and zoning. That change comes looking at the actual average hours of the consultant planner and getting those more accurate than we've had for the last few years. Inspection services, that is paid for through building permit fees. So as we expect building permit fees to go up, there's also an expenditure to that revenue of some of those fees going to cover the cost of the building inspector. And then just some other general fund expenditures. You have the fire district, which is, while not a new expense, but it's different in that we are now the part owners of the fire district. We have a slight increase in 2023 for the fire district. IT support, we mentioned that. Building maintenance. Animal control, this is an item talking with Chief Sandell the last few months. The city, the PD had an annual animal control contract in previous years. That individual went out of the business a couple years ago, and since the PD has been covering animal control themselves, we were discussing it. This becomes an issue of the PD officers doing it. One, there's a liability issue of potentially handling dangerous animals. If they put the an animal in the back of their squad, they got to potentially clean out the back of their squad. And also, if they have to transfer an animal to Babinski, that removes an officer from the service area for up to 2 hours to do that, to go down to Babinski, leave the animal, and then come back. So we felt like the small cost animal control was a benefit of having our officers here and not having to deal with those issues. And then our transfers to other funds that include our annual transfer to the capital fund for future road projects. I'll talk about a little bit how that is affecting us and to a benefit this year. And then also we had a previous debt fund payment that since our debt's paid off, we've also transferred to the capital fund. So we already have that built in the budget should we have to issue debt in the near future. Some of our miscellaneous funds, our EDA fund, that is a levied fund. The main expenditure there is our annual contribution to the Brainerd Lakes Area Economic Development Corporation. They assist us in economic development. Our TIF fund, again, this just is where we take in funds from our different TIF districts and then redistribute them, reimburse them to those that we have agreements, developers we have agreements with, based off of the taxes paid in the increment. Our cemetery fund, there's a very small increase in expenditures just to cover actual costs in landscaping services. Debt service fund, there are no expenditures in our debt service fund in 2023 as the council paid off the last of the city's debt in 2022, so we are currently debt free. Capital fund. We have a couple of items that we are paying for out of the capital fund. Again, the capital fund is not a levied fund. It is a fund that we move funds into for use for purchasing other capital expenditures in the future. This allows us, all these items that are in here, we are then paying with cash on hand. Benefit of that is then we don't have to be putting these items on the levy every single year and having a levy that's constantly going up and down every single year, and we can have somewhat of a consistent levy every year. So breathalyzers, these will actually be alcohol forfeiture funds will be used to buy these. Evidence cameras for the evidence room and squads, we'll be using drug forfeiture funds for those. The Bushman Road Design and Engineering Project, that's our main expenditure. As I mentioned, the city council every year puts money into the capital fund for future road projects. By doing this, by putting a little money in every year, this is going to allow us to pay for this project, which in 2022 or 2023 should run us, it's going to run us about $425,000. It's going to allow the city to pay for cash and not have to put that $400,000 on the levy. Replacement of our sander, some various PD equipment, and then finally, I'll talk about now is that dump truck. As mentioned in the preliminary levy, we added a dump truck, an additional dump truck in there. At that time, the entire dump truck was in the general fund. Working with the finance committee, we moved things around. We're just recommending of the estimated $260,000 to acquire a new dump truck, $75,000 is going to come from the levy. $60,000 has already been allocated from the council from our ARPA funds, leaving the remaining $125,000 to be paid for from our capital fund, from the cash on hand we already have. Again, the reason we're recommending a new dump truck this year, really has a number of benefits to the city, operational benefits. I'll talk first. We are in the winter now. We are in plowing season. So the benefit of the plowing is right now it takes the guys roughly 11-ish hours to plow the city during a regular snow event. We estimate by adding this third dump truck, our public works team will be able to plow the city in roughly a regular work day. What that means is we should save upwards of $150,000 in overtime over the course of this life of this dump truck. In addition to the time savings we have by being able to plow the city faster, not only will we save the money from overtime, it also means less taxing on our guys, especially when you look at those bigger snow events. We always seem to have at least one or two a year where it's like 18 to 20 inches of snow, falls over 48 hours, and when that happens, our guys are out there plowing up to like 18 hours straight. And I'll tell you right now, plowing is not an easy task. They are paying attention at all times. It's taxing. They have to know where their truck is at all times, where the road is at all times. They have to know where their blades are. They have to know where everyone else around them is at all times. Doing that for 12, 13, 14, 15 hours straight is taxing. By having this extra dump truck, again, the guys can plow the city faster, which means during those big events, they can plow the city once, they can take a break, they can get some dinner, they can take a nap, and then go plow out again and be refreshed for that second plowing. And then also, it just also means that, if someone right now, your street gets plowed at 7 o'clock, your street probably is still gonna get plowed at 7 a.m. If you're someone though that's currently street gets plowed at 4 p.m., well, maybe now, again, because we can plow faster, instead of being 4, maybe your street gets plowed at 1. So it means certain areas of the city that are further out in the plow routes get plowed faster. Beyond plowing, we have benefits too. Every spring, our public works team goes out to our gravel roads and dumps fresh aggregate on those roads. An extra dump truck means 33% more aggregate they can haul at any given time, which all means they can do that project faster, which means they can move on to the next project faster. And any project we have that requires the movement of heavy material, again, we have more capability, which means we can do projects faster. This also, again, is also redundancy. If a truck goes down, right now, if we have a truck go down, we just added that much extra time into plowing the city. Now, if we lose a truck with this third truck, it's essentially we're going back to where we are right now, and we're not adding a whole lot extra time. So that is why we're looking to add a dump truck in 2023. In the sewer fund, again, this is an enterprise fund. It's funded primarily through your sewer fees for those that are on the city sewer. There's no significant changes in our operation. In the sewer capital, we do have the main expenditure there is our sewer expansion study. So looking at our levied expenditures and non-tax revenues. So the general fund, looking at our levied funds. In the general fund, we're having a proposed expenditures of $3,250,115. EDA fund, $3,530. Cemetery fund, $19,625. Debt fund, 0. Comes to a total expenditures within our levy of $3,273,270. Again, before I mentioned that how we determine the levy is we take those expenditures and we subtract our non-tax revenues. In the general fund, we estimate $309,906 in non-tax revenues. EDA fund, 0. Cemetery fund, $18,000. Debt fund, 0. Total non-tax revenues of $327,906. So that gets us to our 2023 levy. Again, we mentioned we have 4 different funds. The levy for the general fund, $2,940,209. The EDA fund, $3,530. The cemetery fund, $9,000. The debt fund, 0. This results in a total city levy of $2,952,739. Again, that's an increase of a little over $203,000. I said 205. I had the number earlier. Over last year, or this current year, or roughly a 7% increase over 2022. And again, our preliminary levy we had set at what was a 10% increase. So this final proposed levy is just over $100,000 less than the preliminary. So we took $100,000 off the levy, which has allowed us that roughly 3% decrease from the preliminary. That, Mr. Mayor, I'll take any questions the council has right off the bat. Otherwise, I'd encourage you to open up the public hearing on the 2023 budget and levy.
Thank you, Administrator Chansky, for that presentation. Before I take questions from the council and we open up the public hearing, I am going to do a short 2-minute recess in our meeting so that we have the ability to reset our recording device. So we record all these and we need to take a little break here so that we can get that done. So I am going to recess now at 8 o'clock and I'll reconvene at 8:02.